Religion is absurd, but nowhere more than when they refuse to start asking clear and obvious questions about the things that they believe. This, I would say, is a pretty good example of that. It's also clear proof that they'd rather feel than think, and that's always a problem that we see with most theists. It's also why they don't bring this stuff to us, because we'd much rather think than feel. It all goes completely sideways for the believer, and that's what we're going to see today. It always surprises me what the religious think is impressive, because from where I'm sitting, none of it ever actually is. This time out, we've got a channel called The Islam TV that seems really excited about something out of a hadith, but it just left me wondering if that's all they've got. Why in the world do they think any of this is impressive? Because it's not. It's just not. So let's go see what they think is really exciting and why it's just so banal.
Aisha, our mother, and the mother of the believers, radiallahu anha, she says, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدٍ خَيْرًا. When Allah Azza wa Jal wishes well for one of His servants, He appoints for him or her 1 year before their death an angel that guides them aright, that directs them aright.
And, an angle, huh? And I wouldn't say that if these were just your standard crappy YouTube auto-generated subtitles, but this is part of the video. This is something they came up with. Do you people not know words? But of course, they don't, because that would require some kind of intellect, and I kind of doubt they have any. So 1 year before you die, Allah gives you an angle, and something happens. Yeah, how exactly do you know any of that? Because somebody said so? Well, how did they know that? And this is a problem that we have constantly with the religious. They pretend to know things that they simply cannot demonstrate. They pretend to have knowledge that they simply cannot have. Well, this thing is true. Well, how do you know that? Because the second that you really look at these claims, as I'm certain will happen here, it all falls apart around their ears. So let's see if I'm right going forward, because after listening to the religious for as long as I have, I'm pretty sure that I am.
And inspires them, like motivates them towards those right steps, those right decisions. حتى يقال مات بخير ما كان. Until the person winds up dying and people say, he died, she died in her best state ever.
Yep. So here's kind of the question that I have. If 1 year before you die, you get this angle, and no, I'm not going to let that one go, sorry, but if you're suddenly told all of these steps that you're supposed to take, then how can these people be surprised that they're going to kick off? It's like, oh look, there's my angle. I should start getting ready. That means no Muslim should ever die without a will, right? Because they know they're going to die. And none of them should ever leave anything undone. Well, my angle showed up on May 14th, which means I have until the 14th of next May to set all of my affairs in order. So this ought to be demonstrable, right? Muslims should be the most well-organized people on the planet when it comes to end-of-life decisions. Now, sure, I'm assuming that not everybody gets this special angle, but for the ones that do, it should be really simple to prove that this is going on by accurately predicting the day of their death in the future. That would prove that Islam was right, wouldn't it? So there is this unfailing predictive power that we can test and prove with exacting precision. Okay, where is it? Why is this not going on? Because sorry, I'm just not seeing it.
And that person, as they're dying, they are shown their reward, and so their soul, their spirit becomes anxious because they see this great reward, when they see their reward as they're dying, as the angel of death is there, and they see their reward, their soul gets anxious. And that is the moment, she says, when a person loves to meet Allah, and so Allah loves to meet them.
I thought all Muslims wanted to meet Allah. The more that you look at these claims, the more absurd they all become. So here's this person who is supposed to be living their best life, whatever that means, such that others can see that they are living their best life, whatever that is, and they ought to know for a fact that they are going to die at a specific time based on the time they got their angle and make preparations. And if all of this is true, what is there to be anxious about? This is supposed to be a good thing, right? So I don't get it. I really don't. Because this isn't what we see in reality. This is Muslim story time, and they're hardly alone. All religions do this, making things up for emotional reasons that simply aren't testable or verifiable in the real world, when they ought to be if any of this was true. Because, let's be honest, they really don't care. They don't expect anyone who doesn't already buy into this nonsense to watch any of their videos. They don't expect us to sit here and point and laugh and point out all the problems that they have. And I will say that I've seen a lot of this channel, Islam TV, popping up in my recommendations lately, and they all seem to be the exact same kind of video. Empty claims aimed at the already believing, zero evidence and zero rationality or any deeper introspection. Because, who the hell would want to do that, right?
On the flip side, she continues to say, وَإِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدٍ شَرًّا, and when Allah wishes an evil end for a person, we'll speak about what that means later, inshallah, so stay with us. Why would Allah do that, subhanahu wa ta'ala? When Allah wishes evil for a person, He appoints for him, He unleashes on him or her a shaitan, a demon, a devil.
Well, at least they spelled that right. But again, if you take this to its logical conclusion, which everybody ought to do because everybody ought to be practicing logic, if someone is given a devil or whatever it is, whatever word you want to attach to it, why is this not testable? You should be able to predict the moment of that person's death pretty accurately, right? 1 year from the moment that they got their devil. But it doesn't really work out that way, does it? And for people who do get a devil, knowing what it means, wouldn't you think that at least some of them might try to set things right? I don't know, they might try to make things better. Or they might try to educate people out there into living a better life so that they don't wind up with the same fate. Maybe they might feel sorry for what they've done and try to get better. I don't really know what the theology allows for, but maybe at least some of them might say, well, I'm going to die in a year, so I'm going to use that fact to prove to the world that Allah is real. But that doesn't seem to happen either, does it? Because this would be really handy for providing evidence for this nonsensical deity, wouldn't it? Well, I'm going to die, and I'm going to go to a bad end, but maybe I can help save you. But the religious, they don't ever think about these kind of things, do they? It's all emotional pablum. And it's why this whole thing is just so stupid.
1 year before their death, a devil, and so that devil misguides them, confuses them, وَفَتَنَهُ, and tempts them, meaning in the wrong directions. حَتَّى يُقَالُ مَاتَ بِشَرِّ مَا كَانَ, until it is said, when that person ultimately dies, a year later, this person died at their worst state ever.
And how do you prove that? Because I can kind of see the bald rationalization I'd expect to see here. Anybody who dies successful and happy, well, they got the angle. And anybody who dies poor and unhappy, well, of course, they got the devil. Well, how do you actually prove it, though? Because this is where all the excuses come in. These are the claims made without any kind of rational justification, made to cater to faith and to fifis and nothing else. So let's look at it another way. Maybe nobody actually knows if they have an angle or a demon. That still shouldn't change the testable nature of the claims, though. We ought to see people suddenly getting really successful in the last year of their lives. Once that angle shows up, everything should start going right for them, right? Do we ever see that? I don't think so. I haven't done a study on it, but I don't think so. By the same token, the ones that get the devil, they ought to go completely wrong for the last year of their lives. They ought to fall from whatever lofty places that they were in to nothing in the space of that very last year. Do we see that? No. No, we don't. And again, I haven't done a study, and if anybody wants to point one out to me, I'm perfectly happy to look at it, but as far as I'm aware, we don't see that. This is all just nonsense. You can't put any of it to the test to see if it stands up. And if any of this is true, it ought to be very testable.
As that person is dying, when they see the punishment that awaits them, فَزِعَتْ نَفْسُهُ, their soul panics. It becomes frantic and tries to hide.
It becomes forensic? Are you serious? I mean, really, do they have English-speaking people making these videos? Because clearly not. This isn't YouTube that's doing all this. This is believers just making fools of themselves. I doubt that I'm going to have a place to call out forensics down the road, not like the angles, but for such a short video, it really shouldn't be that difficult to just get the words right. You're just listening to what they're saying and typing it in. If this is the public face that you're presenting to the world, you're not doing yourself any favors.
As we know from other ahadith, and that is when a person hates to meet Allah, and so Allah Azza wa Jal hates to meet them.
Again, not testable, just empty claims made to those who believe it without intellect or rationality. It just makes them feel good, and that's really all they care about. This is one of the core problems of religion, all religion. It just makes a bunch of people react instead of making them think. Anybody who's actually thinking about their beliefs, they ought to be asking questions like I have been. What's the point of any of this if it doesn't somehow further the goals of the religion itself? What does it get you other than being just another quaint, nonsensical story to be spewed from the pulpit? Because that's really all that's going on here. And whether you like it or not, it's stupid. It really is.
This hadith, I'm sure, has moved you, especially if it was the first time you hearing it. I remember the first time I heard this hadith. It moved me deeply.
If it didn't move you to laughter, then you're doing it wrong. Honestly, the religious and the skeptics are looking at these things entirely differently. We want validation. We want verification. They just want their fifis coddled. We care about the truth. They just care about their emotional comfort. And that's just absurd on its face. It's why all of the comments to this video are just mindless religious supplications for peace and happiness. Because these people, they just aren't that bright. They're not at all concerned, and that's kind of a problem. Because they're all a bunch of morons.
And that, a part of that is because it's your first time hearing it. It's not as famous of a wording as similar ahadith that say pretty much the exact same thing in Bukhari, in Muslim. And so there's a lesson there, front and center, that it's your job to keep your heart awake. And one of the ways to do that is to diversify, to change things up. When you hear something for the first time, or hear it again after a long time, it has a different effect.
Well, that was the first time I heard that, or at least I don't remember hearing it before. I've read through a lot of this stuff before, but it never made an impact on me at least, and therefore, my first time that I recall hearing it, my reaction right now is just rolling my eyes at the Islamic idiocy. Because that's really all it is. This should not impress anyone. It should bring up a lot of clear and obvious questions, and for the religiously gullible, it doesn't. And I always question why it doesn't. Shouldn't it? Because these seem really obvious to me. The fact that it never occurs to you people, that's kind of sad, right?
It's just like blessings also. Like when Allah causes interruptions in our blessings, they have renewed value. Like I never felt grateful for my knee before till it started aching. And so you come back to those blessings anew. And so you need to hold yourself accountable. Be, self-aware, self-managing of what is going to keep your heart alive.
Because there's absolutely no reason to think that an imaginary man in the sky has anything at all to do with it. The second that these nonsensical stories start to flow, it becomes really obvious that none of it is at all defensible and all of it ought to be laughed at as ridiculous. Because that's exactly what it is. But that just makes the religious upset, and in the case of at least some subset of Muslims, pretty damn violent. And that's kind of an issue. It ought to make them stop, and it ought to make them think. It ought to make them reconsider believing this crap in the first place. And this is true no matter what religion you're talking about, because all religions do the exact same thing. This is just a way to coddle their feelings, not to come to a rational understanding of the reality that every single one of us shares. Because who cares about any of that, right? You should. Everybody should. It's just sad that so many people don't. Anyway, what do you think? Would hearing this hadith convince you of anything other than the fact that these people are out of their ever-loving minds? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd really like to hear from anybody who thinks they can defend this kind of thing. Why shouldn't we look at claims like this and conclude that this is a pretty good reason not to believe any of it? Because from where I'm sitting, it's the only thing that it actually does, which is why they don't want to talk to us, do they? They don't want to show up at our door and try to present this triumphantly to the skeptics as proof that their gods are real. Because I think they know we're just going to laugh at their asses, because it will do absolutely nothing of the sort. So, what do you think? Let me know.